Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Profiteers versus the People. Today we'll be digging into Aliko Dangote, the Nigerian billionaire who, until very recently, was the richest person on the African continent. Since its founding in 1977, his company, the Dangote Group, has become the largest industrial conglomerate in Africa and operates in Benin, Ghana, Togo, and Zambia. They are big players in cashew nuts, cement, cocoa, cotton, fertilizer, fish, flour, fuel, ginger, pasta, salt, sesame seeds, and sugar, which the group really dominates. The Dangote Group sugar refinery is the main supplier to the country's soft drink companies, breweries, and confectioners, controlling 70% of the market. Dangote also has sizable investments in real estate, banking, transport, and textiles, and employs 11,000 West Africans.
Yeah, as of recording, Dangote's estimated net worth is $9.7 billion, which has frequently put him in the same room as some of the most elite people in the entire world. For example, he has worked with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We mentioned that for the sole purpose of plugging our past episode on Bill Gates. Give it a listen.
Check it out, baby. So, to give a little insight about how Dangote portrays himself, an interviewer once asked him if he saw himself as Africa's hero. And his response was,
well, maybe.
And when he was asked if he came from wealth, his response, and we're paraphrasing a bit here, was,
yes, but I didn't inherit any money.
Which is interesting. So in this episode, we're going to explore how Dangote has amassed such a fortune, despite several civil wars, what his impact has been on Nigeria as a whole, and whether billionaires like Dangote are a necessity in a growing economy. And, of course, we're going to put this bitch on crutches.
Oh, yeah.
For the uninitiated, Crutches is our PR torture test acronym. C stands for consumer harm, R stands for rich parents, U stands for union suppression and employee abuse, T stands for tax avoidance, often disguised as charity, C stands for child labor allegations, H stands for harassment allegations, E stands for egregious behavior after hours, and S stands for slap suits and journalist suppression. I'm Money Mike.
And I'm Rad Bill. And
so, because Aliko's life is so intertwined with the history of Nigeria as a whole, to help us understand how this motherfucker got so goddamn rich, we're gonna have to wind the clock back a bit and do a little bit of world building about Nigeria.
That's right. So Nigeria has a storied history. The Nok culture was smelting iron weapons as early as 1000 BC, which is about half a century before the Iron Age began in Europe. As early as 1100 AD, the city of Ife was using casting techniques to create portraits that wouldn't be used in Europe until the Italian Renaissance, hundreds of years later. The city of Benin was surrounded by an incredible, miles-long engineering feat. It was also a wall. The country was a historical mecca.
Absolutely. However, this prosperity was complicated by the introduction of Portuguese slave traders. When they got there, they made a handful of tribal leaders rich until slavery was eventually abolished in Europe, like so many bordering nations. Once that happened, the British came in afterwards and pretty much made everything worse, as imperialists often do.
I hate it when that happens.
And this isn't to say that everyone lost their asses. Like we said, a handful of Nigerian families got rich as shit off of the British occupation. And one of these oligarchical families was the Donatas. In fact, in the 1940s, a member of the Donata family, and I'm going to butcher this, Al-Hassan Donata, was one of the richest people in Africa. Remember that name, it's going to come up again in like 2 seconds.
That's right. So, British reign continues throughout the region, up through 1956 when oil was discovered in Nigeria's Bayelsa state. We're going to murder every other
butcher
African. This is just going to be atrocious. You can let us have it in the comments and the Q&A. We'll do our best to not read those, but we'll read them and it'll hurt our feelings. So, Oil was discovered in Nigeria's Bayelsa state by the British, who viewed this as key to their economic recovery after World War II. A year later, our boy Aliko Dangote is born. He's the son of Mohammed Dangote, a businessman and politician, and Sensui Dantata.
Yeah, you remember that Al Hassan guy that I just mentioned? Yeah, the rich one. Well, San Sui, and we're probably butchering that too, is his granddaughter, making Aliko Al Hassan's great grandson.
Yeah, so right off the bat, Aliko's born into both money and political influence.
Which is interesting because when he talks about this in interviews, he says that his family was wealthy. But I feel like coming from a line of the richest people in Africa kind of surpasses what I would consider wealthy.
Yeah, like how does he do the nonchalant, like, oh, what, I mean, yeah, our family was kind of influential. Like, it's the family.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the biggest one. It's like being royalty and someone asking if you came from wealth and being like, I guess so. Like, dude, you own the land.
Yeah, I was related to this guy, Bill Gates. He's my great-grandfather. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's, some people think he's kind of rich. But yeah, dude, exactly. Like, this dude was born into the 1% of the 1% of the 1% of wealth.
Yeah.
However, while Sensui and Muhammad were just getting used to parenting little Aliko, the rest of Nigeria decided that it was time for a gigantic fucking revolution.
They sure did. In 1960, the Republic of Nigeria got independence from the British Empire since it was all weak and busted up from war, which Nigeria deserved this independence and the oil that came with it, but it came at a real cost. In total, it's estimated that this conflict led to the deaths of as many as 3 million people. It's important to mention here that 3-year-old Aliko probably didn't see too much time on the battlefield during this conflict.
Yeah, it would not be surprising if even in his early years, 7 to 8 to 9, he didn't even know that these conflicts were happening. I imagine that he probably heard about them in a similar fashion that we did, in the sense that he read about them in an educational or just a very removed sense. This wasn't the world that Aliko was growing up in. He was very protected from that.
When a state fails, it doesn't fail for everyone. For many, battle is happening right outside, but inside, it's business as usual.
Aliko's family is probably more aligned with the imperialists than the citizens of Nigeria. So they're kind of riding the same wave, if that makes any sense.
That's right. They're on the side of the oppressors.
Absolutely.
For the next decade and a half, while Aliko's going through school, Nigeria would continue to experience civil and political unrest. However, in 1977, while Aliko was still in college, Aliko came home from Cairo to start the Dangote Group. He was trained by his uncle on his maternal side, the Dantata side, who taught him some of the ropes of business, and that very same year, Aliko relocated the company to Lagos to expand it, where he received 500,000 naira as a loan from his uncle. We're probably mispronouncing naira, and from this point on, we're going to continue to mispronounce that if we are. So he took that 500,000 naira loan from his uncle and began trading in commodities like bagged cement, sugar, and rice. We see the math on this get thrown about all the time. Some sources claim this amount converted to a few $1,000s at the time, which conjures the image of Aliko carting around a playhouse wagon full of bags of cement in downtown Lagos looking for a potential buyer. But according to our math and our sources, in 1977, 500,000 naira translated to almost $1 million frickin' dollars.
Yeah, there were a lot of numbers being thrown around, like Rad Bill said, and I'm not willing to commit to one of those sources. But the important thing to remember here is if you look at PR sources about Dangote, they'll claim that he came to Lagos with nothing. And I quote that from an article that I read. But it's very clear that whether it was worth $3,000 or $1 million, he definitely didn't come to Lagos with nothing. And he had a ton of connections that he was able to leverage. So he was carting around like 50 playhouse wagons of concrete at a bare minimum.
Entrepreneurs love the Dwight Schrute paperclip trade scenario, where you start with a paperclip and trade up to something like a badass telescope. But every time we've looked into a real-life scenario like this, it's been a fucking lie.
Dude, yeah. The other thing that entrepreneurs fail to consider is that there are a depressing number of times that your boy Jim will walk in, intercept the trade, and leave our young do-it-yourselfer with a fistful of magic fucking beans.
Yeah. When I was young and naive, I actually tried something like this with the end goal of a Ferrari.
How'd that go?
Well, I didn't have like money to start, so I was offering hand jobs, and I wound up giving a hand job for some magic fucking beans.
I feel like we talk about hand jobs a lot on this podcast.
Dude, we do. That's like an ongoing theme on this podcast.
We really need to just either A, upgrade to blowjobs like a couple of gentlemen, or B, find a different shtick.
Or C, you forgot the third option, which is we change the name of the podcast to The Hand Job Show.
Well, honestly, that might help our viewership.
You know, it could.
Anyway, so back to Aliko. So he had anywhere from $3,000 to $1 million that he put into a commodities trading firm in Lagos in the 1970s.
Yeah, surely as a result of that and his vast network, he was able to quickly scale and pay his uncle back. You know, there's this funny double-edged sword, going back to that for just a second, based on the sources we've read. Investopedia was one source who valued this original investment at a measly $3,000 and applauds his business acumen at being able to pay his uncle back after 3 months. Like, dog, it took you 3 months to pay back $3,000. That's like $1,000 a month. You can make that bussing tables.
Maybe that was a secret. He was just bussing tables, and that's how he paid it off.
There you go. So after he finished bussing tables, the self-made stuff came into play.
Yes. This brings us into the early 80s. And like we said earlier, the history of Nigeria and the life of Aliko Dangote are just intertwined. So we have to talk about them at the same time.
Yeah.
So the early 80s would be a tumultuous time for Nigeria. However, all of this chaos would prove to benefit Aliko. But buckle up, because we're going to be throwing a lot of names and governments at you in a short time, but we're going to try to add a summary at the end of the lightning round just to kind of put it all together.
Yes. So, the government of Shinu Shigari, definitely butchering that too, introduced austerity measures to help the nation cope with declining oil revenues. This involved an import licensing mechanism and a lengthy new licensing process for business ventures in the country. Many businesses failed to start as a result of this slow turnaround time that licensing required.
But not Dangote, because of course he was such a self-starter.
That's our boy.
The strong political ties held by his family allowed Dangote to get the required licenses really quickly, enabling him to move from bussing tables or selling cement door to door or whatever to importing rice, flour, and sugar with very little competition. And he became a key player quickly in the logistical management of these goods. But just to be crystal clear here, he became a key player because he was one of the only players, because his oligarchical family ties allowed him to be a player in the first place. So again, massive self-starter, right?
Straight up. But then, Muhammad Buhari decided to rise to power with a military regime. Aside from purging the government, jailing dissenters, and executing those accused of counterfeiting, arson, and cocaine use, Buhari's administration was focused on import substitutions and exports.
So because of this, Dangote would quickly realign his business strategy and branch into the manufacturing or export of calico, cashew nuts, gum, Arabic, textiles, ginnery, and cotton. So basically, he got a heads up of what the political climate was because of his ties and changed gears before anybody else had time to.
We can't say with any degree of certainty, but he was intertwined enough to where this could have come up in a closed-door conversation before it was introduced to the public.
Allegedly.
Alas, Buhari is overthrown by General Babangida just 20 months after coming into power. In an attempt to reverse a continuing economic decline, Babangida introduced the Structural Adjustment Program, or SAP. in 1986 with the intention of reducing government interference in business. And in 1988, he introduced a decree to begin privatizing government-owned businesses.
Oh, yay. Free market deregulation. Oh, our hero. This will definitely benefit the people of Nigeria and not a select group of already wealthy business owners, right? Well, actually, this allowed Dangote to strike up a deal with the Central Bank of Nigeria, allowing his company to manage their fleet of staff buses, and weirdly enough, get even richer.
After getting rid of all those pesky buses, Babangida tried the whole democracy thing in 1993, but annulled the results of the election because he didn't like them very much, and this led to his ousting shortly thereafter, and yet another political crisis.
Dios mío.
General Sani Abacha took the reins next and embezzled billions of dollars while jailing dissenters and executing protesters of Royal Dutch Shell's activity in the region.
Yeah, this didn't bode well for the people of Nigeria, as you might expect. But, weirdly enough, it worked out pretty well for Dangote. Because in 1996, Abacha ordered Dangote to flood the nation's market with rice. He imported so much that the price of rice tanked by 80%. But Dangote still made a tidy profit.
Yeah, that's right. Abacha died mysteriously in 1998, and his successor, here it goes again.
Ooh, I can't read that.
Olusegun Obasanjo established a democracy which has lasted since then.
Yes.
So things stabilize here.
Yes.
So up to this point, despite all the self-made memes you see about Dangote, his political ties and existing wealth have allowed him to tow into every political tidal wave and ride them to success.
Yeah. Basically, for the past 2 decades, Nigeria has been cycling through dysfunctional regime after dysfunctional regime, and Dangote has managed to get rich off of every single one of them. That is a interesting coincidence.
It is. We can sit here and pretend that this was some sort of intuition, but really I think he was just getting the answers slipped to him on the table.
Yeah, allegedly.
Allegedly. So as things stabilize, cement demand in Nigeria skyrockets. And this is in the 90s. And although most of the policy that was more threatening to international business was dead and gone, the big corporates were still pretty apprehensive to establish large-scale operations within Nigeria's borders. As such, they would instead send in the material and have it bagged locally. That way they could say that part of the manufacturing process took place in Nigeria. Dangote got in on this, and with a little bit of entrepreneurial magic and thorough ties with the government, he was able to secure special concessions that weren't offered to others and dominate this business. According to a leaked U.S. government report, it was these concessions and the contacts granting them that allowed Dangote to construct his own berth,
which is a special dock designed for cargo ships.
At the Apapa port in Lagos. That port, by the way, is state-owned. From here, shipments of cement could be offloaded and sent directly to Dangote's factory. At one point, these advantages handed him 46% of Nigeria's bulk cement market.
Jeez.
So in 1999, Obasanjo is elected, as we mentioned, signaling some stability for the African country. Further, Obasanjo is pretty close with our buddy Dangote, who allegedly gave pretty generously to his campaign. Obasanjo adopts the backwards integration policy, which was designed to bring cement production to Nigeria and discourage continued use of imports. Because cement manufacturing is capital intensive, and Nigeria is politically unstable historically, the big internationals are apprehensive about setting up shop. The stage was set for Dangote to move from importing to full-on manufacturing. Before implementing backwards integration policy, Obasanjo kicked things off by privatizing all government-controlled cement plants.
Yeah, and he did this by selling the government shares in all cement companies in Nigeria. And Dangote was able to secure controlling interest, or 66%, in the Benue Cement Company.
So privatizing state-owned infrastructure always backfires, but it's worth noting that a ton of these plants were operating at suboptimal capacity or weren't operating at all before being sold. So handing them off to private groups could, in theory, have
Makes
upped
sense.
output, and it did, as it turns out. Fast forward a little, it's 2002, and it is now BIP time. These cement plants have been privatized, so here we go. BIP specified that the only groups that can receive the required cement import licenses were the ones that proved that they were building local cement manufacturing facilities. Also, BIP provided a VAT exemption and a custom duty for the import of all cement manufacturing equipment, and new investments in cement manufacturing were also eligible for a 7-year tax exemption.
Many people believe that all of these policies were essentially bought and paid for by Dangote. And this theory isn't just spun out of thin air. Dangote contributed $2 million to Obasanjo's re-election campaign. He contributed $500,000 to the National Mosque under the aegis of Friends of Obasanjo and Atiku, and he kicked in $2 million for the Presidential Library. So these could be donations,
allegedly,
from the bottom of Dangote's heart.
Mm-hmm.
Or they could be something else. I think there's a name for that.
Oh, what do they call those? It's called a bride. No, that's not right. Shit.
No, it's close though. We'll get back to that later.
Yeah.
So, also, during this time, Dangote was effectively given exclusive import rights for rice and sugar. And he got in touch with the Kogi state government, who wanted to partner with this company and give him access to a cement plant that was built 10 years prior. They basically do the same thing where they offered Dangote 7 years of tax relief and exemption from levies. The KSG, or Kogi state government, was apparently set to receive 10% equity in this venture.
That's right. To celebrate, Dangote's pasta company fired 7 union leaders, and a court battle ensued that lasted until September of 2007. The courts handed a victory to the unions. Hooray!
It took them long enough, though. Right?
Yeah. Dangote then appealed this ruling to a higher court, which in January of 2009 ruled in favor of the unions again. Boom!
Hell yeah. Somebody cares about the unions.
Yeah, it's about damn time. 5 years pass and throughout this entire process, which is ridiculous. But
Oof.
Now that that's out of the way, a year later, one of his pasta plants locks out 250 employees accused of unionizing, and a handful are assaulted by hired thugs, and one man is beaten and locked into a box. At this point in this event, all who enter the plant are required to sign a denunciation of the NUFBTE union.
That sounds like weirdly like union suppression. I don't know.
It's ringing all sorts of little bells like that. It's suspicious.
So during the 6-year stint, Ibeto Cement, which was a key competitor to Dangote Cement, is ordered closed by President Obasanjo. It was alleged that they were bagging cement, which went against the BIP. And they were supposed to be manufacturing it, which maybe was a legitimate problem, or maybe Dangote was just eliminating the competition by weaponizing the government.
Yeah.
So with Ibeto Cement out of the way, Dangote is able to raise prices and ultimately becomes a billionaire.
There it is. The Ibeto facility is reopened in October of 2007 after a new administration takes office. Apparently, Obasanjo might have been a bit rash with his decision to close the Ibeto plant, suspending thousands of jobs and halting the flow of resources. Ibeto was offered a tax break by the new administration to help make up for the losses suffered, and Dangote went ahead and sued to block this tax break soon after on the grounds that it was anti-competitive.
It was anti-competitive! You can't give a tax break to the company that I put out of business by weaponizing that administration. That isn't fucking fair.
This is bullshit. That is tipping the scales in a completely unfair way.
This man is the hero of Africa. That's not great.
What didn't he give like a maybe answer? It was something like leaning into the hero thing.
Dude, the smile that he gave when the interviewer was like, Michael Bloomberg called you the hero of Africa. What do you think? He was like, oh, well, it kind of like blushed a little bit. Maybe.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, God.
Not all heroes wear capes, says Michael Bloomberg.
We should do an episode on Michael Bloomberg at some point. I don't really know that much about him, but I feel like we have some fun with him.
Q&A time. Should we do an episode on Michael Bloomberg?
Anyway, as we understand it, the anti-competitive suit was thrown out. But Dangote sued to have them shut down once again when Buhari took office. And as soon as Ibeto closed, the cost of a bag of cement jumped 60%. And as of October 2022, Ibeto cement remains closed. Now, I want to contextualize this really quickly. Because sometimes when you tell these stories in a vacuum, we think, oh man, one business owner fucked over another business owner. But we have to remember the scale at which these players are playing this game at. A, when plants get shut down, people lose jobs who don't know Dangote or any of the other people that are in control of these events. And two, when the prices of input goods rise a ton, it wreaks havoc on an economy.
Yeah.
Especially an economy that is building. If you think of what cement is used for and where Nigeria is in its history right now, cement is building the infrastructure of this country. And when you inflate that price 60%, it fucks over everybody. So this isn't just a story of one business owner fucking over another business owner. This is a story of a business owner fucking over a country.
Yeah, well said. On a side note, we read an article that was clearly encouraged or funded or whatever by Ibeto, who, by the way, is another billionaire in Nigeria. The article is praising Ibeto for not thinking like Dangote on the monopoly front, and instead is focused on selling premium concrete at lower prices. And there's this line that reads, "Unfortunately, while the souls of the poor in the society were busy thanking God for bringing Ibeto to their rescue and give meaning to their lives, Muhammad Buhari came to power and closed the plant, blah, blah, blah." But I just love the idea that Ibeto selling cheap bags of cement is giving meaning to people's lives.
Billionaires have the grossest God complex. I was reading this thread today about shitty professions, and this might be a huge tangent.
It's okay.
But one of the big ones that came up was surgeons. Surgeons have this God complex, and they tend to be assholes who boss people around. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody in the thread who was like, but here's the thing. They have to be, because they're saving people's lives. It's what they do on a daily basis. And the only way that a human being can handle that level of stress is A, to have a predisposition towards psychopathy, and B, to kind of lean into that and weed out some of the emotions connected to the job, because again, they have to do it well. But people like this have no reason to be the way they are.
Yeah, a surgeon can do it because it's life and death. They can be like, I need this right fucking now. It's a matter of life and death.
I need 4,700 bags of cement instead of 4,500 bags of cement. I'm giving these people purpose.
Who are the guys who do the ads asking for like 10 cents a day?
Oh, I don't even know.
For a measly 10 cents a day, you can give the children of this remote African village each one bag of cement. I love it paints this picture of Ibeto being like Willy Wonka.
Oh, well said. Kind of going back to your example, it's like they treat jobs like charity.
Yeah.
For 10 cents a day, you can put a poor orphan in a cement factory. Wait a minute.
Wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. Why am I happy about this?
So, it should come as no surprise that because he has a monopoly on cement at this time, Dangote is doing pretty fucking well.
Yeah, cement accounts for 80% of his fortune, and he's had technical monopolies on a pretty wide swath of goods at this point. So, he is crushing it. To your point earlier, being as integral as cement is to Nigeria, he really kind of does get to play God with this monopoly. He's the linchpin.
Absolutely. He didn't like the way that something happened. He just called the president and they fucking fixed it for him.
Yeah, come hell or high water. So, with his love of unions and his respect for fair competition, President Goodluck Jonathan decides to appoint Dangote to serve as a member of his economic management team. Good luck, for those that don't know, means Uba Oma in Igbo. Sorry. That was stupid. I just love seeing a name from another country and I speak the language in which the name like has a meaning. You hear, oh, my name is this or that, and it means this in this other language. And I just love that I can plainly see that one and be like, oh yeah, no, that translates in English as good luck. And he gets this fun, like, define it for other people moment probably in some of his travels.
That's like my parents just being really fucking jazzed about me being born, and I can just walk up to him and be like, hey man, my name's High Five Jones. It translates roughly to we did it in English.
Anyway, over the next few years, Aliko Dangote is just crushing it. He leases an abandoned piece of land from the Nigerian Ports Authority, surely at a hefty discount, allegedly, and builds the third largest sugar refinery in the entire world. This, combined with his other business activities at the time, add $9.2 billion to his fortune, making him the 30th richest person in the entire world. He also kicks off a project to build a massive oil refinery, and he signs contracts with China's Sonoma International Engineering Company to build cement plants in Cameroon, Ethiopia, Kenya, Mali, Niger, Nigeria again, Senegal, and also Zambia. So, in his industries at this point, Dangote is about as big as he can get. So how does he grow his wealth? Well, first, he gets an astonishing amount of tax relief.
Yeah, we've already talked about how enmeshed Dangote is with the government, but it gets worse. So in 2015, a leak reveals that Dangote is using a tax haven in the British Virgin Islands. The community doesn't like this.
Oh, yeah, I hate when that happens.
God damn. And it just goes on from there. In 2016, a report comes out revealing that Goodluck Jonathan's administration gave Aliko Dangote an illegal 1 billion naira import waiver and concessions to import rice. The report goes on to say that the federal government gave away 78 billion naira in 2011, 128 billion naira in 2012, 46 billion naira in 2013. Again, just waivers and concessions and grants. Experts were quoted as saying,
oh, yeah, I hate when that happens.
God damn it. He doesn't tell me he's going to do this. I swear to God. I am being tortured as much as you all. But the naira, I think, is worth a little under 10 cents now. So these are still millions of dollars.
These are massive amounts for a country that is struggling with tax revenues to be giving out.
That's important. Like, this isn't a country that has strong infrastructure. It's being built. So they need this money.
True.
And then in 2017, Dangote is awarded a contract to rebuild the 35-kilometer highway in Lagos. At the Business Day Road Construction Seminar, the Minister of Power, Works and Housing disclosed that Dangote had been awarded the contract and there was a 10-year tax incentive for the Dangote group being reviewed. So basically, again, this dude is getting just so much tax relief. This guy is avoiding so much in taxes, he's making Michael Bloomberg look like fucking Robin Hood. But I don't know if that made sense. But yeah, so go ahead and read the next part. I feel like that's...
Sure. To give you an idea of how gracious these tax breaks have been, in May of 2021, Dangote Cement's taxes increased by 47.3% as the result of one of many tax holidays coming to an end. The 40.3 billion naira he wound up paying is almost on par with the total income tax paid by Nigerian banks in that quarter of that year.
Christ.
They paid 42.2 billion naira over that very same period.
Jesus Christ. Different lines of his companies receive these tax holidays, so that's why he was paying something the previous year. But these holidays aren't for his entire empire, but over time, they've grown to include so much of it that he's able to avoid just so much in taxes.
It's pretty crazy, by the way, that he gets all these tax breaks from his buddies in government and still feels the need to hide a significant portion of his fortune in tax havens. Burns my cooter.
He's pulling a fucking, he's pulling a Jordan Belfort.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's getting off scot-free and being like, no. I need to do some more illegal shit.
You know what would help with this? Crime. He cuts costs in pretty egregious ways as well. He converted all of his cement plants to run on coal, which coats the neighboring towns in an even thicker and more toxic layer of soot than they were already covered with. But the other big trick he employs to continue making more and more is suppressing competition using the scale of his empire and his government ties. We've already touched on this a little with Abeto's cement plant, but the latest series of spats with BUA are pretty telling.
Important note here, BUA is not to be pitied as we go through this.
Yeah.
They're given a lot of the same special treatment that Dangote receives.
Mm-hmm.
When the borders were closed in 2019, both Dangote and BUA were given the right to continue exporting, while just about everyone else in that line of business came to a complete halt.
That's right. So in 2017, this thing with BUA kicks off. Dangote holds a monopoly on cement in Nigeria and accuses BUA of operating a cement plant without the necessary licenses. We've seen him pull this trick before. It's a huge story, and BUA counters by saying that Dangote is just trying to stifle competition.
Which it wouldn't be the first time.
In 2020, Dangote accused BUA of unlawfully developing a sugar plant in Port Harcourt. Murdering that again, probably. See, in 2019, the country had made assurances that no new sugar plants would be developed in the coming years, which is quite convenient for Dangote and seems to contradict the development of this new sugar plant in Port Harcourt. The state intervened and demanded proof from BUA that their plant met required quotas for the manufacture of sugar, which BUA apparently supplied, before stating that A, Dangote operated under the exact same specs that their plant operated under, and B, Dangote took a stab at price fixing and sought the assistance of BUA, which is pretty damning. Dangote allegedly wanted to hike the price of sugar for the duration of Ramadan, the most profitable time of year for sugar sales in Nigeria. He wanted to hike them by 40%.
Jesus.
Yeah. So BUA supposed that their refusal to participate is what precipitated Dangote reporting them to the Minister of Trade and Investment for selling their products locally instead of exporting them. Dangote vehemently denied the allegations and was right back at BUA's ass when BUA announced plans to build a new cement plant in Sokoto State. Dangote accused them of stealing trademarks and infringing on patents because they had already announced a plan to build there. BUA countered by accusing Dangote of trying to monopolize the market.
Which he kind of is.
Yeah, he's kind of doing it again, isn't he? These two start pointing fingers again, and it's suddenly all over Nigerian media. There's ardent defenses for both parties everywhere you look. This is all Nigerian viewership is hearing about. So to get Dangote to knock it off eventually, BUA sought and got a restraining order from Dangote, and their sugar plant was awarded a restraining order against the state.
That's interesting.
That is fucking crazy.
Can I get a restraining order against the state, please?
What does that mean? Is that sugar refinery its own country now?
The state can't come within 200 feet of me. Or I'm going to call the state police? I don't know. But, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to be a bit of a broken record here, but I think, again, with these little corporate dramas, we have to contextualize.
Yeah.
So this feels like, this is probably a bad example, but it feels like a Rockefeller versus Carnegie. It feels like a clash of Nigerian titans. Mm-hmm. No matter who wins in this shit, consumers will always lose.
Yeah.
Because price fixing, for example, to be clear about what that is when two big players get together and say, hey, I want to make more money, you want to make more money, let's raise prices so then consumers have no option to buy anything other than our stuff, and there won't be any other competition in the market, and then we'll make more money. Again, who loses? Consumers every time. And this might be a bit of a tangent. I went to this really interesting speaking event one time, and this guy, he was painting it as a story of redemption, and he went to jail in the States for price fixing. He worked for a company who did it. Because again, price fixing is a crime in the United States. I think he went to jail for 5 years. And he was giving his speech about how he was, reformed and how the universe works in mysterious ways. And the only thing I could think as he was going on and on is, this fucking piece of shit. Oh my God. If I could punch him in the dick and get away with it, I would. Violence is wrong. Dude. Don't do violence. But he kept saying yeah, I was so blessed when I got out of jail and was instantly offered a CEO position at a competing company. And it was just, the curtain was peeled back from this corporate bullshit. And I'm like, oh, it's all fucked. Yeah. It's all fucked.
He said the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, there are no consequences anymore. What the fuck? So
completely detached from real life. He took a price fixing scandal and made it a story where he was the victim.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God. I'm like, the other people in the crowd were like, he's a different man now. I'm like,
he's reformed.
Yeah, because he hasn't suffered any consequences. He's encouraged. He'll do it again. He'll totally do it again.
Praise the white guy in the clouds. The lowly CEO fighting against the hordes.
Back to our story.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dangote's Obahana cement plant is closed by the Kogi state government. And the agreement, if you remember, to take on the Obahana cement factory would have entitled the Kogi people to 10% of the profits. Again, we talked about that earlier. Mm-hmm. And that would have been significant. However, Dangote wasn't paying that 10%. Yeah. Instead, he claimed the Kogi state had the option to purchase a 5% stake, but missed this chance. Mm-hmm. And another drama ensues, and in the midst of this dispute, the Kogi state asked Dangote to produce proof that the acquisition involved valuable consideration, which is money, and he couldn't. And this is why the plant closed. And it remained closed for 10 days, but the courts eventually overruled, and it was allowed to reopen because Dangote is too big to fail. The government was like, hey, you remember when you promised us money? And he was like, nope.
Yeah. Hey, I feel like you've been a real stickler for this whole license thing with some other guys, but can you remind us what we talked about with this Kogi plant here? Did you give us money for that?
Yeah, and he was like, nah, go fuck yourself. And they were like, oh, all right, well, I guess that's it.
Damn.
So this year, Dangote dropped to the second richest man in Nigeria, right behind the BUA founder, whose name I'm about to murder, Abdul Rabu. And this is partially due to BUA's growth, the whole drama we talked about, and monetary policy in Nigeria. And he launched an oil refinery because of the weakened state that other refineries are in throughout Nigeria, and he basically has a monopoly that looks like, at least in the immediate future, prices for oil in Nigeria are going to rise, not fall. So that brings us to the present day. Let's revisit some of the questions from before and see if we can get some good answers. How did Dangote get so rich? Well, he started where all successful billionaires come from, by being born rich.
Yeah. That part's key.
And then by being born egregiously rich.
Yes.
And then he sided with dictators for tax breaks. He exploited people and did terrible things like price fixing. Yeah, wouldn't you?
So here's the thing. Billionaires don't make their money by being heroes. Dangote's money could have been a massive force in the fight for stability. I mean, we've just discussed and seen firsthand how influential this money was over policy in Nigeria. But where it could have been a massive force in the fight for stability, it was too busy making Dangote more money. Doing nothing about the chaos around him was a choice that Dangote made every minute of every day of the last 4.5 decades. Billionaires make their money by being not heroes. They're just aren't that many problems in the world today that can earn someone money while actually really solving the issue. Tony Stark spent the majority of his time on screen fighting his own stupid and dangerous inventions. This isn't the anyone can make it if they work hard story that it wants to be. It's the story of a man crossing bridges built by his family and then taking meticulous care to burn those bridges after he crosses. His success is a closed door for others, not an open one. He built his refinery, and Nigerians rejoice. Huzzah! Oil imports have taken a quarter of the national budget for the last several years, and his refinery was viewed as the solution, but it isn't. Oil prices are forecasted to go up. Nigeria has taken a problem that stemmed from imperialism and later corruption and handed the solution to a man who has benefited handsomely from both.
100%. So we talked about this a little bit, but let's spell it out. What has...
That is an interesting question. Dangote's fortune has come and depends on his maintenance of control over how Nigeria grows. He controls most of the cement in Nigeria. And to your earlier point, the cement is vital to the continued and sustained growth of Nigeria. So as long as he can maintain scarcity, keep prices up, and continue to suppress competition, his fortune continues to grow. He maintains that exact same force and influence throughout Nigeria. So his impact on Nigeria is that now, where it was up to Nigeria as a whole on how it grew and what the destiny of this lifeblood of Nigeria, the cement, was, keep in mind that cement was produced by the state before this and then was sold off to people like Aliko Dangote. Now, it all comes back to him. His impact is that he is the deciding factor now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially in Dangote's situation, because sometimes people get very wealthy riding the waves of change.
Mm-hmm.
But when you come from wealth, you don't really want anything to change.
Yeah.
Because whatever power structure is in place has clearly worked for you. And I think without knowing a ton of Nigerian history or the current events of Nigeria, it's allowed the face of Nigeria to change, but the inner workings, the social ladder of Nigeria has probably stayed very much the same.
For sure.
It's bad.
It is bad. I hate fucking talking about freedom like this. It sounds so dogmatic, but there are two different kinds of freedoms that conflict with one another, and they're sort of used interchangeably, which I think creates a lot of confusion. There is freedom to influence the world around you and to enact change, and there is freedom from change. And these are two very different freedoms, and someone like Aliko Dangote badly wants freedom from change, where what Nigeria needs at this point is autonomy among the masses. They deserve the right to have some autonomy over their own destinies. And for Aliko to maintain the power that he has now, he has got to keep all of that autonomy for himself.
Yep. And I feel like we're belaboring this point, but I think it's fun to look at a billionaire from a different culture. And the effect is so obvious. Like, it's like, oh my God, this guy is such a garbage human being. He's clearly being terrible for everyone in the society that he inhabits. But then when we look at American billionaires, we're like, you know, what if they weren't so bad? And I feel like it gives me a perspective on, and we already did an episode on him, but it recontextualizes Andrew Carnegie for me. It recontextualizes the Industrial Revolution magnate, which is just someone who cheated and stole. Now,
Yeah. So I've got one for you this time.
Okay.
Are billionaires a necessity?
Billionaires are not a cause or a catalyst billionaires are a symptom. They are a result. Billionaires are the result of bad legislative practices, not hard work. When you see water pooling, you don't think, what did the water do right? You think, what is going on in the water's environment that caused it to pool? Power is the exact same way. Nigeria has industrialized a great deal as a result of Aliko Dangote, but it isn't better off. The industries that people could have grown into were all given to one fucking guy. Yeah. Imagine where that tax revenue could have gotten the rest of Nigeria if it wasn't being discounted for one person.
Yeah.
And we imagine people like Dangote pioneering a path for the rest of us. But in order for Dangote to continue excelling, he has to keep everybody else suppressed. The only reason that he got as rich as he did is he kept making it impossible for competition to exist around him, which, from a pure capitalistic point of view, makes everything worse for everybody. His profit margin has historically relied heavily on the fact that social mobility in Nigeria was and is low as far as our research goes. So let's wrap it up. We've been monologuing a lot tonight. Crutches. What do we got?
So for the C, consumer harm, big time. We have price fixing. We have towns covered in toxic soot. We have suppression of competition. R, he's got among the richest and most connected of rich parents. They don't get too much richer than this.
They don't.
Yeah.
When Aliko says his parents were wealthy, he says, yes, my parents were wealthy, but I didn't inherit any money.
Mm-hmm.
But what he means is he took a loan against his inheritance and then paid it back later. Isn't that what happened?
Well, so he took a loan from his uncle, but you found that interview where he was pressed, where he's, oh yeah, my dad died when I was young, and the guy's like, well, your dad was pretty powerful. Did he not leave an inheritance? And Aliko goes, no. I mean, he did. He left an inheritance, but at this point, it's all been donated, so it's basically no inheritance.
Yeah, just his commitment to the rags to riches thing really can't be overemphasized. Again, this dude was Bill Gates' grandson and was like, yeah, I'm a rags to riches phenom. What can I say?
The U for union suppression and employee abuse. Whenever needed, he suppressed the shit out of unions. In the cases we found, it was robber baron style union suppression. The T for tax evasion, so much tax evasion.
Is it evasion when the government, makes a deal with you so you can do it?
There was a ton of that, but there was also the offshoring stuff.
Yeah, there was. He was given tax breaks and still felt the need to evade. Yeah.
Child labor, we couldn't find anything on it. The H and the E are both earned because he made death threats to a mistress for posting pictures of his ass, which, again, he gets both of those for that.
Just some, angsty teenage boy shit. What the fuck?
I know. You couldn't see much of it. I got a good look at I inspected that booty pic pretty carefully. It was not terribly revealing.
Yeah, I was honestly pretty disappointed by it.
Me too. For the S, he does get the S also. This mistress just put him on the frickin' board here. He gets the S because he took the mistress to court after she posted the picture of his luscious dump truck on Instagram. He slapped her with an extortion case and then dropped it the day before his deadline for producing evidence of said extortion. Classic slap suit shit.
Dude, what a piece of shit. Guys, thanks again for listening. We love doing this, and we are so excited to get to talk to you again in 2 weeks. As always, subscribe, hit us up on Reddit. If you want to talk to us, we'd love to talk to you. Shoot us an email, profitversuspeeps@gmail.com, or feel free to leave a comment, and we will cherish it forever, unless it's bad, in which case we will tell ourselves it doesn't matter and
try to delete it and not know how. It'll just be on there still, and it'll haunt us.
If you would like to crush someone's spirit, you really have an opportunity. Anyway, thanks again, gang. We will talk to you soon. Goodbye.